Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan, my co-host. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Ty Aller. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing in Northern Utah and is the co-creator of Parenting with Emotional Intelligence, a course supporting parents' emotional intelligence. Please welcome Ty. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Yes, definitely. So tell me a little more about your story into becoming a marriage and family therapist, and specifically towards becoming one that focuses on parenting with emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny to think that, I landed on parenting courses because that's not necessarily where I started out. So when I graduated high school, I was thinking, I want to help people. Didn't know how to do that. I was actually thinking of going into law school originally, have an undergrad degree in political science and one in psychology. And I think that's actually where Donovan was studying psychology too. So we used to talk about it throughout, years of doing research with different people. I landed on parenting, largely just because of availability of research labs. Doing it became more and more fun. And then I got into a marriage and family therapy program, opened a practice where I see mostly adolescents. And I realized seeing them individually 1 hour a week wasn't getting a lot of bang for my buck because I said the systems they were living in. And I went, wow, I wonder if there's a way we could get to more people in a more effective way to kind of complement what we're doing in therapy. So it's not a replacement for therapy, but it helps kind of that system they're going home to. So I started using a lot of the therapy components, turned them into more educational components. And now we've launched this Parenting with Emotional Intelligence course while I'm still doing, private practice. And I also work for a university doing research around similar topics around this therapy modality called acceptance commitment therapy. So kind of a winding road, but I've been able to kind of blend all of these colors into hopefully one pretty picture for everyone kind of looking at it.
Great. So can you tell us a little more about this acceptance commitment therapy? What does that entail?
Yeah, I love getting people, a captive audience, to listen to preach. So, acceptance commitment therapy was actually developed by an individual named Stephen Hayes, Kelly Wilson, and Kurt Stroessel out of the University of Nevada, Reno. And the idea of it is it basically takes mindfulness practices you hear in Buddhism and combines it with what we know from behaviorism and kind of combines those into the best of both worlds to get acceptance and mindful change into the best behavior practices to live more of a valued life. It really kind of addresses our internal struggles. So things like thoughts and feelings that we might get really hooked by, and then create kind of language-based rules, this language creation machine we have in our minds that can really get our actions moving in a way that's not super useful. So acceptance commitment therapy just teaches you some basic skills to work more openly and acceptingly of those internal experiences so we can actually make more meaningful action towards things that matter to us. Are you all right if I give you guys an example of what that sounds like in non-academic terms? Is that cool?
Yeah, sure.
One that comes to my mind a lot is I experienced a ton of anxiety growing up and was actually treated for it using cognitive behavioral therapy all growing up. And it wasn't until I found acceptance practices that it really changed. So one of the examples I had was family. Family gives me so much anxiety. I had this rule that if I wasn't a specific way or acted in a specific way, I wasn't going to be accepted. Caused my anxiety. So I had this language-based rule. And what I was able to do is just start noticing my mind doing that. And I went, okay, that rule is going to be there. But what are the qualities of the person I want to be in these family relationships? And how can I show up for those even while my mind's doing all that noise and having all those thoughts? So through some practice and some acceptance and mindfulness-based activities, I was able to find okay, I can live with those thoughts, even though they might be kind of uncomfortable. And these values and use them as a compass to guide these qualities and these behaviors I want. So I can start showing up for myself and creating the life I want, even while those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings keep coming. And that's kind of the idea behind acceptance commitment therapy. It's not to get rid of or challenge thoughts. It's more just accept that they naturally ebb and flow and come and go. And we can still make committed action towards things that we give a crap about in ways that kind of create patterns in lives that we care about.
Mm.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on kind of taking that ACT stuff, right? How does that inform or color this specific niche of parenting? Because it sounds like, ACT is kind of this more general thing. People may or may not be familiar with it, but it sounds like you've really drilled down into the specifics of a certain type of relationship. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how those things interact.
Yeah, so from like a big level, ACT is actually really useful because it's a process-based therapy, so it doesn't get too focused on any specific group or any specific problem behavior, which is really, really powerful for like a change strategy because these are general principles, and I think, Donovan, you get excited about those types of things because you're always, from my understanding, wanting things that drive change no matter who you are, what the issue is. So what we see in ACT, or at least what a lot of the believers in ACT do, is they go, hey, this process seems to work for any group, and we can actually teach it in educational seminars. So that was kind of the beginning of this idea. And then as I started working with parents more, I realized, oh, what ACT is really good at is taking stressors that we can't get rid of, kids, like you can't just get rid of your kids, and it helps you learn how to interact with that stress in a way that doesn't get in the way of you being who you want to be to your kiddos. So I wonder if there's a way, though, to do that outside of therapy, because the service ratio, the one-to-one service ratio, is something that we're always trying to find a way to break out of that mold. So I was like, I wonder if we can do it educationally without therapy to do it. Then other issue that I've seen in a lot of these parenting programs is they're like, hey, here are 4 steps to get rid of the parenting behavior, the behaviors in your kids you don't want to see. I just think that approach is kind of crap because it's useful. It tells us messages. It communicates what kids need or their needs are. And so instead of trying to change the behavior, we go, hey, if we're more accepting and are more open to exploring it, more curious about it, we can actually learn to not react to troubling behaviors or troubling emotions. We can actually respond to it in a way that we're proud of and teach kiddos to do that same thing. So that's the parenting with emotional intelligence. It combines kind of things we know from behaviorism. So one of my co-owners of the business is, behavior expert. Another one has a master's in special education, so she takes a lot of sensory processing stuff. We combine all of that into a nice little package that teaches you how to respond to your kiddos, but we do it through the parent as the vehicle, saying, hey, parenting's stressful. You're going to have a lot of these stressful reactions, but if we learn to respond to them better, our kiddos are going to learn how to respond to them better. So it's kind of a sneaky way of getting to kids, creating better homes without therapy through education. So I hope that made sense how we blend all of those worlds into one.
Yeah, I thought it actually makes a lot of sense to me, and that kind of, or let me try to clarify to see if I got it or not. Basically, both adults and children are going to experience stress in their life, and it's about interacting and engaging with the stress in a different way. So it's not like, oh no, you have stress, you got to get rid of it. It's more of like, let's interact and accept that it's going to be a part of life, and let's take actions, but let's not be stopped by that stress. Let's take actions to what we're committed to moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
An example on that, it's like, that, for instance, like my girlfriend's kid is she's struggling with bedtime. It's so frustrating. Like, you're like, go to sleep, please. We can get rest. And there she's knocking on the door, and it's like, okay, in that moment, you're going to have a reaction, right? Like, you're like, oh, this again. I may start going like, oh, I must be a bad parent. I must be doing it. And then you might get more and more frustrated. So it's almost like it turns on a struggle switch where you start interacting with your environment in a way that's not super helpful. And then you might get more frustrated with your kiddo, which is going to escalate them. And then you start seeing the change. So the idea behind some of this acceptance commitment therapy is to, instead of interact with that struggle switch, it's just to notice that it's there and let it come and go naturally.
What about, I'm sure like parents that are listening and being like, but what if the kid is going to go to bed super late and then they're going to wake up tired and then it's going to throw off our whole day, and they still want, it's like, just accept that the kid's going to go to bed late all the time. What would you say to that parent, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a useful question. One that comes up is that there's this idea in Western culture, I think, that acceptance means that you can't move toward a different end.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance, I think a more useful term might be willingness to experience.
Mm.
We're not saying accept it and just accept the outcome. For instance, angry kids that have a lot of anger, they might harm someone, right? They might punch their sibling.
Yeah.
We're not going to accept the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying, hey, accept the emotion and the internal experience that comes up so you can respond to the behaviors in more effective ways.
Mm-hmm.
They're effective behavior change strategies.
Mm-hmm.
That kiddo that might not be going to sleep, it's not saying, hey, quit trying on bedtime routines. We'll actually help you come up with better behavior strategies. And that's the cool thing about ACT is it says, hey, there's some really good behavior strategies out there that we can combine with this.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to encourage parents that instead of resisting with that internal battle that often pulls parents away from responding in the ways that they want to engage with it in a way that you're willing to let it be there so it frees up space so you can respond in the way you're proud of.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm listening to you, I think I see a distinction forming, and I want to make sure that I'm mapping it correctly. But it sounds like the acceptance part is not around behaviors. It's not around like, oh, it's totally cool if you stay up all night every night. It's more around accepting the frustration that's coming through as you work through that process. So that instead of, you getting frustrated and emotionally worked up and into a place where you are kind of reacting and just go like, hey, like start screaming or something, right? Like you have to go to bed right now or whatever consequences. But it's more about going, okay, this is a frustrating experience. I'm okay being frustrated here. I can sit in this, and then we can keep working towards kind of these better outcomes, these better behaviors. Does that map correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of what's going on. This
Mm-hmm.
acceptance piece is really geared towards those internal experiences. And behavior, how we view it and conceptualize it is it's learning. That's how we interact with our world. And interacting with our world is going to give us more useful feedback than this word machine of our mind. Because especially when you experience generalized anxiety disorder like myself, I can come up with a billion different reasons the world's going to crush me. And that's not always useful. Sometimes it's useful, like when I'm trying to cross the road and I'm worried about a car coming around the corner. That's a useful time that anxiety's popping up.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to help people use that behavior and interacting with their world in ways that we're going, is this useful for the life I want or not? So staying up all night, having a kiddo stay up until 3 a.m., not super useful for development of the kid or your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. I guess my question that I feel like is still missing for me is, okay, so I can be with the frustration. I can accept the frustration if I were a parent and the kid's like refusing to go to bed. But I'm like, what do I do? What do I do from there? Exactly. They still go to like, what is the productive way to handle it and interact with the child? I don't expect it to be an overnight quick fix kind of thing. It's a gradual progression I'd expect. But what kinds of things or structures or should I implement to move towards the goal that would be in the best interest of the child?
Yeah, I think that is a really useful question. And when I kind of relate it back to being out in the middle of an ocean where you don't have any landmarks to guide your ship.
Mm-hmm.
Can be what parenting feels like. The wind blowing in every which direction. You got waves that are just crashing down. The ship's going everywhere, and you're going, what direction do I even steer in?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that every parent I've ever met has an internal compass that if they, touch base with, it can actually guide that ship. And that's the values component of ACT.
Mm.
Values, an easier way to say it, might be the qualities that you want to show up in your life in everyday action. So when I talk to parents in my therapy room, they'll often say, I want to respond caringly, compassionately, empathetically, consistently, all LY terms. And I go, great, there's our compass. So now compare that with behavior strategies, but I get them connected with that compass because we know two things by research is the values can help buffer against distress and they can help make more meaningful behavior change. Because when you have someone, for instance, that we say throw them on an exercise bike and we give them prompts like, hey, pedal harder, versus when we throw someone on an exercise bike and say, hey, why do you want to exercise? Oh, it's to, rest with your kiddos, or to play with your kiddos. And play soccer. They're more likely to actually put more effort into that exercise now. Stephen King mentions that in one of his books, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we actually see that consistent in other research for other groups too.
So I want to make sure again that I'm tracking right, but it sounds like, Dr. Alice, what you're asking about is like, how do we change specific behaviors, or what are the specific things that we've been doing? And it sounds like the approach here is not that granular. It's more at a higher level to go, okay, how do we get the process in place? How do we get the environment in place? And then once those pieces, and it sounds like that's the main focus, but like once those pieces are there so that the baseline is good, then you can kind of focus on specific behaviors based on whatever it's like seems to fit based on, like values, right? Values are going to be the higher level thing. And from those values, once you're in touch with those, you can dig out some more specific behaviors. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm tracking correctly.
So I'll just kind of orient us back to a conversation I have often with clients and with parents when we're doing workshops. Is a lot of the questions y'all ask is, how do we get to an outcome? That's the underlying
right.
An outcome. That's normal. We hear those messages, social media, self-help books, everywhere. But that is a fragment of control. It's like, hey, we can control a behavior. We can control a feeling. We can control a thought. And what ACT's trying to shift is, hey, maybe that's actually not the most useful playbook. Maybe there's rules to this game. And the rules are instead to be aware and accepting. So that's why a lot of my conversation is purposely trying to shift us away from the control strategies to acceptance strategies. And you're right. Once they get connected with those values, then we can start setting up behavior strategies that are very much a behaviorist approach. We try things in our environment to see if it's more useful. But I do purposefully shift conversations more toward these values and acceptance pieces, because everyone's so good in the self-help industry of saying, here's how you get a different behavior. And I go, cool. But what does that equate to for a valued life? Have an actual compass to keep guiding us.
Yeah, I could see that for parents and wanting like a certain outcome. But I think like what came up for me, which I think, I'm not a parent yet, but I think what I would assume, I don't know if a parent would think this, but I feel like there would be the fear of letting go of the control that they have to interact with to be able to, because it's like, if I just give up control and it's gonna, all hell will break loose. Is kind of like the thought in my head. It's gonna be a disaster. And so it's like, how do you comfort parents in those moments of getting over the fear of letting go of the control?
I think that's a really normal experience, and our minds do have the tendency to try to say like, hey, if you drop this, it's like a tug. If you let go, if you don't keep pulling, you're going to be pulled into that hole and you're going to lose. The idea though is that why can't we just drop the rope and keep trying to tug? So there's a fundamental problem with control. Like if I were to sit here and do an activity with y'all and I said, for the next 30 seconds, I don't want you guys to feel any feelings. You already failed, right? So you just hey, control your thoughts. Don't think of an elephant. Well, everyone freaking starts thinking about an elephant. But if I say, hey, I want you to go move that book on your bookshelf, you're going to laugh at me and go, well, yeah, I can do that. And I go, great. What we're trying to do is let those thoughts and feelings go, because it's futile to control those, but we can influence our external world and our behavior. And
okay.
Magic starts to happen.
Yeah.
So on that note, I kind of want to tie it back into the project you've been working on. If, let's say I'm a parent, which I'm not, I don't think anyone here is, but we'll pull it back into like, I'm a parent, I come in, what can I expect for signing up for this course? And another piece is, when is it going to make sense for me? Like, what kind of person would I need to be for it to be useful, and what kind would it not be useful for?
Yeah, so the course itself is designed for parents of children 0 to 8. we're currently in the process of trying to expand that, but that's our very first project, is trying to get the kiddos 0 to 8. And that's kind of purposeful, is that we know that most social and emotional development gets its foundation in 0 to 5. So we're trying to help people get those skills pretty immediately. I will say, so we piloted this, and with our focus group, they basically said, for the first week we were going, well, what the heck? Where's our strategies? Where are our behavior
Right.
outcomes? And that's purposeful. That's what I hear in therapy every single first session is I say, what do you want out of therapy? I want to feel less depressed and I want to be less anxious. And I go, okay, that makes sense. I get why we want to be there, but what do you want your life to look like?
Mm-hmm.
And we ask those questions from the get-go in the course because we know this is how our minds are set up. They're trying to solve problems. But what happens if it's not a problem? It's an experience to be had. Who's it useful for? I'd say anyone that's willing and ready to want to actually invest in some real change. Different though. We know that our program and the ACT approach in general is probably a very limited voice in the world, meaning that a lot of people are on these control strategies. They're getting the message over and over again. If you just control your thoughts, change your thoughts, be happy, use a gratitude journal. Those can be useful strategies. They're short term. They're really effective in the short term, but long term, I've tried to control my anxiety. It resulted, in lots of substance use waves and isolation. Wasn't fun. And if we can let those kind of naturally flow, we're able to start making more change. So who's it for? Anyone that wants to, really actually change some of their parenting and is willing to invest the time. And it's kind of geared towards those 0 to 8 kids.
Yeah, that's good. That's really helpful to know the age target, right? Because I imagine, again, don't have any kids, but I imagine the journey of parenting changes quite a bit. And while I think we made it pretty clear that the focus here is pretty high level, I still imagine there are some things that get shaken up even at the values level as you have a kid transitioning from a small child to a teenager to an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our course is kind of set up with the 3 A's that are outlined by a guy named Dr. Russ Harris from Australia. It's all about acceptance. Acknowledging things and the sensations we have, accepting that and being willing to experience it, and then accommodating it in our home through behavior strategies. So 1/3 of our course are all those behavior strategies y'all are asking about. It's like, what are the specific things we do? And those are where we really see the age piece come in because, setting up bedtime routine for a 3-year-old, a lot different than setting But, that is our focus groups have said like, hey, we really want a teen course. And that's kind of what we've started to work on. And that's where my expertise area is. That's what my PhD is in, is adolescent development. So yeah, I agree with you there. And it's a little bit of a different beast.
Yeah, I think it is important to establish, because I, as a stress and anxiety expert, I know a lot of people with dealing with stress and anxiety, that often is a manifestation of things that happen to them in their childhood, specifically under 8 and under. And so I think it is important to build those skills because you're so young. You like, if your parent snaps at you, and they could be amazing, incredible parents and loving, they're exhausted, they're tired, and they might have like snapped and just like yelled at, and then the child interprets it as like, oh, they don't love me, they don't care, all of that. And so I think it's really important for parents to interact with their children in a way. And, parents are gonna mess it up because that's what it is to be a parent, but to have more understanding and grace and acceptance, and to develop the emotional intelligence to interact with the kids to create less childhood wounds sounds like a positive thing in my book.
Yeah, and I even noticed I like the language we use is more shifting towards that approach that we're trying to say, is that it's more about being willing to experience again. So lots of feelings that come up, we're not trying to control them. And some of those reactions are because of those rules that we learned as growing up. When you have, for instance, when I had anxiety growing up, it was often this implicit message that until you're done feeling that, I can't give you connection. We start pairing those associations later in life because we have these language-based rules. When they're feeling that feeling, it's wrong. Hey, just be happy. Why are you so grumpy?
Mm-hmm.
Change that. And it teaches us, it pairs the association that, ooh, that feeling's bad. I can't feel it. Well, we just showed you how effective it is to try to control a feeling. So if we build association with it, that's how people end up in my room often.
Mm-hmm.
They have that negative association, kind of like you're talking about. And so if we can actually just be more experiencing of thoughts and feelings, it can be pretty powerful.
Definitely.
Can I
Oh,
give you
sure. Go for it.
those examples? So this one was
Yeah, we love examples.
tested me yesterday in therapy. You know, I have a client that I've worked with for quite a while, and
Mm-hmm.
they experienced a lot of suicidality. So suicidal thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
those come up in therapy. I've often seen other providers freak out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, you're having that. We got to hurry and let's get you into the hospital. And you can feel the heightened response.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, the suicidal thoughts are just another thought. Yeah, we've got to take them seriously and make sure the safety's mellowed,
Yeah.
make sure safety precautions are taken. But my initial response to that was like, oh, that must be a pretty powerful thought. You must be experiencing some pain. Help me understand it more.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're not going to freak out to this thought. Maybe I don't have to freak out so much about it either. And through consistency, we're able to actually start talking about it, and it creates space to be like, oh, experiencing pain in this other way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can actually use some more useful behaviors than just my mind and this problem solving machine trying to say, hey, maybe suicide's the way to deal with this pain.
Wow. That's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually resonates with me a lot. I did not have the benefit of learning this through a guide of some sort, but that's definitely something I've had throughout my life, is just these intrusive thoughts with suicidal ideation. And when I was younger and I didn't know what was going on, I used to really freak out, and I used to really be like, there's something terribly wrong with me. What is going on? What am I going to do about this? I don't know. And you know, with that specific community that we both grew up in, it's like not something that's super comfortable to talk about or very open. And eventually I stumbled upon somewhere or another of like, you can look at these thoughts, even though they could potentially be serious in nature, as just a product of the mind, not necessarily something you have to identify with in the way of saying, this is me and this is like, I have to deal with this and do something now. But you can go through the process of just like, oh, and I'm now at the point where it's like, that's weird that my brain is really freaking out like that. I might need to look and see if there's something else going on. However, in my personal experience, there's been a lot of times where nothing is going on. So I'm just like, okay, brain, well, that's nice. I'm going to just let that one roll on by and just keep going. But it's such a different personal experience between identifying with it and basically like in the language we've been using today, not accepting it, right? And pushing against it and saying like, why is this happening? This should not be in my brain. And being like, oh, I guess this is how minds work. And sometimes they make these things. And, you know, I don't have any intention of moving forward or pushing forward on any of that, but things are like developing in a way that I can just let it pass. Huge difference for me. So I don't really have a question or anything, just on a personal note, that really resonates and is part of my experience.
That's so freaking cool, because that's it. That's the process, is going like, oh, our minds have thoughts. And by being willing to experience the thought doesn't say we're accepting the action of the thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, when I work with individuals with obsessive compulsive disorder, that's the crutch right there, is they're saying they're having this thought that comes in, and if they don't do it, something bad's going to happen. And so being able to help show them the power of like noticing thoughts and just letting them exist. Or, for instance, people that have experienced trauma, I must be bad, the shame component that comes up. I'm bad. I'm fundamentally bad because of these experiences. Our minds create a rule that this happened because of X, Y, and Z. So we get connected and it defines who we are. But if we can notice ourselves in context, just like, well, I am happy, but not, or I am an asshole. Sorry to swear on your podcast, but not.
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to go, in some context I am that way, sometimes not. So we can start using these psychological flexibility skills in ways, you know. Alice, you mentioned one. Donovan just mentioned another one. I mentioned some in parenting and some in my anxiety. That's why we started seeing, wow, everyone that has this language skill seems to be able to use this process and apply it to lots of different issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it's so powerful. And I've never drank the Kool-Aid so strong in my life. And being in a community where a lot of people drink a specific Kool-Aid, I'm like, oh, I'm finally falling on a bandwagon where I drink.
Nice. Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense to me, because when you can interact with a thought differently, so it doesn't have so much power over you, all those negative thoughts, it's kind of what I'm hearing is like you're separating out and distinguishing thoughts from reality. It's like thoughts are thoughts. It doesn't mean it's real life. Like you may think I'm a terrible person, I suck, nobody loves me, but that's not necessarily the reality of the situation. So it's like teasing it out so it doesn't have such a tight hold over us.
Yeah, and I think what my mind does when you say the reality piece, I start thinking to myself, is it useful to determine reality? Is it more helpful to just ask, is this thought useful for me?
Yeah.
Because what can start to happen and what, I pick on Donovan a little bit because he likes CBT type approaches quite a bit. And honestly, those helped me get through my teenage life. Are super helpful. And this therapy is an approach based on CBT. But one of the fundamental problems is it true or not? Well, that's not always the most useful thing, because sometimes the thought could be true, so to speak.
True-ish.
In helping you go in the direction you want to. Question I always encourage parents to use, my friends, is asking myself, like, is this useful for me?
Yeah.
And if you got that compass, those values that you're connected to, so much easier to answer that question, because you go, oh yeah, it's useful for me to eat 3 more Twinkies before I go run.
Maybe it is for some people. Yeah. Now that's a really good question. People can, pause and ask themselves, is this thought useful? Can give them a little more clarity moving forward and what action they want to take.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, Ty, we really appreciate you coming up on our show. And is there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up today?
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram. I believe the handle will probably be in your guys' link. I think it's called Parenting Big Emotions. You can buy our course on Teachable, or even connect with us on Instagram if you have questions and want to learn more about our products. If you want to learn more about acceptance commitment therapy, feel free to talk. I love talking about this stuff. So anyway, thank you both for having me on, and it was fun.
Yeah, it's been fun having you.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.